Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are going to discuss chapter 6 of your books in history, Hindu-Muslim unity. This is the time period from 1912 to 1922. And the topics we are going to cover include the Waqf Validating Bill, the Lucknow Act, Montagu Chelmsford reforms, how the Congress rejected reforms, the Rowlatt Act of 1919, Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, Khilafat movement, and Hijrat movement. So before we start discussing the Waqf Validating Bill, I would like to give you a little bit background. So as you know that the First World War had just come to an end, in which the Indians had helped the British with money and men in the war. And in return, they expected that the British would give them autonomy, whereas the British were not ready as yet to give up their colony. And as a competent lawyer, Mr. Jinnah joined the Congress and strived to bring the Hindus on a common platform. In 1910, Mr. Jinnah took an active part in Congress's politics, and in 1919, he introduced the Waqf Validating Bill, which was accepted 2 years later by the British. So these were essentially the first legislative measures that Mr. Jinnah introduced in 1919. This was accepted by British 2 years later. And in 1913, Mr. Jinnah joined the Muslim League and got busy into bringing Congress and Muslims together. The Muslim League members insisted that the Congress must accept that the principle of separate electorates in the Lucknow Pact of 1916. Then came the Montagu Chelmsford reforms of 1919. The proposal was given by Montagu, who was the Secretary of State, and Chelmsford, who was the Viceroy in 1919. Under these reforms, the main thing that was introduced was the system of diarchy. Now let's understand what diarchy is. Diarchy is essentially a style of government in which the power was divided between the Indians and the British. But this was done only at the provincial level. Under the reforms, the British were to retain control over military matters, currency, communications, and criminal law, while in the provincial councils were given control over Indian education, agriculture, health, local self-government, and public works. And there were also reserved seats in all provincial legislatures for religious groups, including Muslims, Indians, and Christians. The reforms of 1919 proved disappointing to the Congress leaders, as their expectation of self-rule was not fulfilled. Instead, the system of diarchy was devised to give political power to the Indians in successive stages. Hence, the Congress rejected the 1919 reforms. The Indian National Congress rejected these reforms and did not take part in the first elections held under the Act of 1919. Hindus and Muslims openly opposed the British government, especially after the passing of Rowlatt Act of 1919 and the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy that we are going to be discussing, which happened in 1919 again. So, coming to the Rowlatt Act. Now, what was the reason that this act was introduced? This act was passed to stop the revolutionary activities of Indians in Bengal, Bombay, and Punjab. Now, the act came as a shock to Congress as they had helped the British in World War One. Because of the act, imprisonment could be done without trial. And trial was allowed by judges and not by jury. And there was no right of appeal, censorship, and house arrests of suspects was possible. Mr. Jinnah immediately showed strong opposition to the stifling of civil liberties through this act. Mr. Jinnah, as in opposition, resigned from the Imperial Council in protest against the Rowlatt Act. Simultaneously, when the Rowlatt Act came into force, it led to deaths of 5,000 defenseless people in Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. And when the news of the gathering reached the authorities, General Dyer drove into the Bagh and ordered his soldiers to fire at unarmed crowd, which caused this tragedy. General Dyer showed no compassion and said it was his duty to enforce the law and prevent the rebellion. On your screens, you can see the image of Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, in which you can see thousands of people mercilessly killed and slaughtered by the British. As a homework assignment, I would like you to conduct research on Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, and we will, inshallah, flip the classroom in our next lesson. Thank you.